All right, everyone, now we have to talk about Joe Biden's temper tantrum the other day with Peter Doocy. Now, my first thought about this, Biden is making a presser, and Peter Doocy is trying to ask him questions. Of course, Biden doesn't want to talk to him. So he asks what would be a relatively pointed question as the press is being ushered out, which is, do you think that the inflation is going to weigh heavily on your party during the midterms? Is it a detriment to your party running? It's a fairly straightforward question, and of course, it's technically rhetorical. The answer is, of course, inflation's not going to be great for our polling numbers. It's one of the bigger issues, along with the border and COVID, that happen to be on the plate. Biden has failed at all these. Again, a reason he wouldn't want to answer questions. Mostly, they usher the press out after a couple of scripted fluff piece questions. So they'll have CNN ask him what his favorite ice cream is. MSNBC, Joy Reid will be there. She'll ask, how's your dog doing? Biden will shoot the shit for 5 minutes, and then everyone gets ushered out. They don't want Peter Doocy to even speak. Now, keep in mind the weakness. The legacy media, Peter Doocy works for Fox. They're controlled opposition. They won't even answer his fucking questions. Here's the thing. Doocy asked his question, and Biden acts dismissive. He did the thing that he's sort of done before, where an innocuous question that a normal person would straightforwardly answer and say, no, they'd spin it maybe and say, well, no, because the inflation's the problem of shortages and they're waning. It's due to Trump's policies. Orange man bad. And as far as the liberals go, they'd be fine. They eat it right up. I still see Biden bots and shills claiming that Trump somehow is responsible for the inflation. You'll remember I got into a debate about half a year ago about this subject, of course, at this point, long after the initial stimulation of the economy that Trump issued. No, the inflation right now is the result of the American Rescue Act. It's a Biden proposal, where he threw a shit ton of money into the economy. None of it actually trickled down to help anyone. Still massive economic issues, but it did cause inflation. The Fed began printing more money to cover the cost, a de facto tax on the lower classes. So then Biden reacts and he's like, oh, no, inflation's an asset. Jesus, what a stupid son of a bitch. He's apologized for this. So Biden calls a member of the press a stupid son of a bitch. I recall the press saying that was insurrectionist speech and a danger to the First Amendment when Trump did it, as he did, fairly frequently. He was no friend to the legacy media. But they're not doing that for Joe. They're not even really talking about it. But normal people did. Hashtag Tempertantrumjoe was trending actually the other day, and not just on Twitter. It was a temper tantrum. He did the same thing like he did with that construction worker when asked about guns. He did the same thing when he challenged a man to a push-up contest and called him fat. He has these outbursts when he's asked innocuous questions. He's not being badgered. Doocy was badgering him in the sense of trying to get an answer on a question, but it was a straightforward question. It wasn't even particularly pointed. Do you think that there's going to be an impact on your party during the midterms as the result of inflation? I could think of 1,000 different ways to spin that. Biden should have said, well, I don't think inflation will be particularly high by then because of my great economic leadership. Now, no reasonable person takes that seriously, but it would be red meat to the base. Dem partisans and the last 10 people that aren't in a grave or ineligible that actually voted for Biden for personal purposes, they'd love it. Well, no loss. If anything, you can look presidential. Oh, I don't think there will be a problem by then. I think there's the second quarter will be better than the first. Begrudging admission of an entire year of presidential failure. But he didn't. But then I had other thoughts. The first thought was, I don't technically disagree with him. Of course, Doocy and all of these other people in the press pool, most of them are stupid. These are empty suits that were chosen in some cases for the way they look, in some cases for the way they talk, and in some cases because they knew the right people and got the right degree. They're not chosen because of their deep introspection or their high value that they place on journalism and journalistic integrity. There's no journalism in the legacy media anyway. I would have preferred Joe Biden whirl his hands around in the air and say, you're all stupid sons of bitches, because then he would actually have an accomplishment. He'd be telling the truth the first time in his godforsaken asterisk administration. Yeah, the legacy media deserves to be chastised, but Biden's so dumb the only person he has a problem with is Doocy, despite the fact that the question wasn't even obtuse. And so then people are pounding him. Then, the next day, he comes out, he calls Doocy and apologizes to him. Well, I'm sorry that I called you a stupid son of a bitch. I shouldn't have done that. as though he would have answered the question otherwise. You know, he had a hot mic moment. He's not really apologetic. It's just he's like, whoops, I got caught with my pants down, like all the times I pooped in the White House hall and had to blame the dog so people wouldn't know how fucked up I am. That's where Biden's mentality really lies. It would have been an accomplishment if he had extended that to the legacy media at large. But most of them are state media at this point. They take marching orders explicitly from the White House, which is why their articles released in short order often use the same basic terminology. I read 3 news items the other day that said basically the same thing. Joe Biden's first quarter was messy. There was a rough road in his first year, but it's just the first quarter, don't worry everyone. Things can only get better because it can't fucking get any worse than they already are, is the intonation. All of them also compared Joe Biden to none other than Hoover. You remember of Hooverville fame? The dude who didn't address the Great Depression enough and people were suffering and so he gets booted out and people decide socialism is a better idea. Now, historical reality, of course, is that Hoover was doing, technically speaking, the right thing and just had really, really shitty goddamn optics. The government should have pulled back even further. The correction would have been quick. The socialism was what kept the Great Depression going for quite some time, about 2 decades. That was FDR's fault. The socialist side failed. But the perception of Hoover is as a disconnected, elitist, plutocratic snob who didn't understand economics and was dismissive of the fact that people were homeless and migrating around, the Dust Bowl and shit at the time, Grapes of Wrath style shit, and that wealth was being pissed away and the people like Hoover didn't care. That was the optics. But yet it's a good comparison. Well, the optics of Biden are somehow worse. Of course, his administration is optically terrible, even more than in the pragmatic sense of actual policy. Biden and Psaki and so forth just don't care. And this time it's not just a perception that's built by some political opponents. It's genuine. It's real. Psaki is openly dismissive of the little people's plight. Like the other day telling him, just punch a pillow, have a margarita, and go back to work. Why are you so worried, brah? Now, Psaki, of course, has... Well, how much money does she make to be the press secretary? At least in the medium 6-figure range. Well, yeah, of course, you're not worried. Your margaritas don't have to come in a bottle either, like some trailer dweller. So, yeah, link in the description here. You can see how funny it is. Biden had a temper tantrum. He had an old man spell, an old man tantrum, and the legacy media is covering for him by not even widely reporting on it. The absence speaks louder than any words that they could utter at certain points. That's the other point. That's about all. Peace out.